Hello, how's it going? This is Hobbs. It's our dog we've had for a year. Hope you're doing well. Today we're going to talk about functions and classes in Python. And I'll first can download my IPYNB file. And then I've opened it up in my Jupyter notebook using my Anaconda. Just click in right here. You can click the base and open with Jupyter Notebook. So functions are used all the time, and they're a way to organize code, just like classes are. We'll talk about classes in just a minute. Functions start with a definition, DEF, and then you name your function. This is the name. It can't have any spaces or start with a number or a special character. And then there's a parenthesis, and this is the function arguments that you would have. And then there's a colon, and then you have to have a tab or spaces to set it apart from other lines of code. I hope you can hear me. So here is a simple function. You do not have to have a return statement. So this is a perfectly valid function. Well, if I had, let's say, 2 plus 2 or 2 plus 3 equals sum x. This is a valid function, although it doesn't return anything. It just assigns x variables. So usually you'd want to add. In this case, we want to have a function to add 2 to any number. So we're going to return the number plus 2. And I can print that, so add 2, so I should have 5 plus 2 is 7. And I can print that this way, or with my fprint statement. And the sum of 5 and 2 is, with my curly braces, it will return the function value, and I can pass it any value here, like perhaps 6. And then the sum of, I'd have to change this one to 6 and 2 is 8. So how about if we have a function that instead of returning a value prints a result? So let's do that. So let's say def add 2 number, and let's just say print this just like we have it here. Well, let's do this. F the sum of number plus 2 is number plus 2. So in this case, there's not a return statement for the function. Forgot my ending. But I can still, when I call this with 5 plus 2 is 7, and I can do 8. So it's just printing. It's that's the action of the function, is to print. So how about a function that has a default value for a parameter? So what if I don't want to have to give it something, or if I call it, it already has some default value. I just specify that. Let's say my default value is 4. And maybe I return my number plus 2. So now when I call my function with 5 or nothing, it returns 6 because the number is default 4. But I can change it to 7, and it will return 7 plus 2 is 9. Well, how about a function that takes an argument that could be a list or a tuple? We learned about lists and tuples, so let's just say add all items in list. Notice I'm calling the function by what it does. That's a good idea. And you don't have to have spaces. Get used to not using spaces. And then let's say here's my list, and let's say its default value is 3 and 4. I have my colon and my indent, and let's sum that. So let's say the function should use a loop, so let's use our loop. So we got for each in li, then we can say let's initialize our sum. Sums is 0, and then we can do sums plus equal, which is the same as equal sums plus each, and then I can return sums. And now when I call my add all items in list, it will return 7. 3 plus 4 is 7, and I can add a new list or a tuple. Let's do a tuple. Oh, and there's my list, 25. Well, we'll watch what happens if what about if I have in here a string? It's gonna call a value error because this is a string and it can't add strings to other numbers. So what if we add something in here to make sure there's a catch? So let's check it first. If well, when we're scanning through each of the items, if each is, let's say type each is not equal to int, then we don't want it to, we want to say return value error must be a number. And what if it's not what if it's a decimal place? This won't catch it. So maybe we type each not equal to float. And let's try that. I gotta have my colon. And now add all items in list. Let's do 3, 4, 5. Value error must be a number. Let's make sure it will work there. So that's one way to catch user entry errors. So there's some examples for you on using conditional statements inside a function. Now let's talk about classes. Classes. So classes are another way to organize code, and object-oriented code is using classes or objects. And an object is just an instance of a class, and it's defined with the class keyword, and you have to initialize the class. And so this init is a function within the class, although we won't use that. I don't recommend that. We use the params package, and so you can pip install param with your terminal. So when you do that, you can come here and open a terminal and say pip install params and it will install it. And you can import that param package right there, and then you're going to specify, let's make a jar class that has a single property of its size in liters. So that's why I like the param package, but it's a function of this param parameterized, and the documentation is here. If you go param python package, welcome to param right here. That's the one. So getting started, conda install param or pip install param. So pip install param, requirement already satisfied. You can use either one of those, and there's a user guide on how to use it, but this package is super helpful. And so right here we're going to use the param package for helping us specify classes. In the param package, you use it in this regard. You type class, and then we're going to have our jar class. So it's a jar, and it can have a size. And in this parentheses, as it brings in the parameterized methods. So we first define the size as a number, param.number, and its default value is 5. And then there's bounds. It can be from 0 to 100. If the user tries to set a size outside of that, it'll give an error. And then there's a documentation string. This is the size of the jar in liters. So when we do that, it creates the jar object or jar class, and we can instantiate it with a blue jar. So let's say blue jar is a jar of size 10. So there we go. If we type blue jar, it will say it's a jar, and it gives it a default name, and here's its size. And if we type help blue jar, it will print out what this thing is. So it is a class, and it has different parameters there that you can set, one of which is size. Its default value is, its current value is 5. Wait, that's not right, is it? The size is 10. Why does it say, oh, this must be the default value. And there's the bounds, and then here's the documentation string, size of the jar in liters, size of the jar in liters. So that's just kind of talks about the class itself. So you can do help with this in any number of objects. Print is an object, or list is an object, tuple is an object, so on and so forth. And this one we just created, blue jar. It will do that. Or the class itself, it will print the same thing. So that's super helpful. Let's now add another parameter to the jar class. This is how much is in the jar. So let's come over here, and let's add another parameter. Say amount. It's param.number. It's a number, and the amount is 1. Let's say 1 liter there, and it's got to be less than our size, right? And we'll do the similar bounds. We could change these. It could be the size. This is amount in the jar in liters, and that's the default amount is 1. We could make that 0, perhaps, make it empty. And then we can set this up, initialize it as well, and this time the amount. So if I don't put anything in here, it uses the default value, so there's amount of 0. Or if I put an amount, let's put it 3 liters, it'll have 3 liters. Or I can reference this as dot notation as amount. And there's 3, or my size, dot notation. And let's see if we can add another, let's add a method to the class, or a function. So that's used define, def, because it's a function. And let's add fill. Let's say it's a fill. So we fill it. And when you define a function within a class, you always have to start it with self. So it refers to itself. And let's say a fill amount. And let's add. So when we fill it, we're going to say self.amount equals self.amount plus the fill amount. So there we go. And now we can call this blue size. Let's fill it. Let's say we fill with another liter. So now we should have 4. So let's check it. Blue jar.amount. Now it's 4 because we filled it with 1 liter. That can be super helpful. Let's say we want a green jar with a different amount. So we can initiate that. Say we have the same size as the blue one, and maybe we have an amount of 4 liters. And here's our green jar, and then our blue jar. It can have different amounts. So this can be well, in this case it now has different amounts. The green jar has 6 liters. The blue jar has 4. So this can be helpful if you're really helpful if you have different objects that are built the same way. So we'll use this in your homework, and God lives and loves us. Have a great day.